Questions without notice. Are there any questions? The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Mr Acting Speaker, I direct my question to the Prime Minister. Does the Prime Minister agree with the member for Kalgoorlie, who normally sits behind him, who today described the League of Rights as, and I quote, just an ordinary little organisation? Does the Prime Minister share the member for Kalgoorlie's concerns about, quote, the power and influence of Zionists? If he doesn't agree, what action has the Prime Minister taken today to discipline his own party member? Or when it comes to McCarthyist smears, is this another case of his double standards?
Order. The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the strike against the Leader of the Opposition yesterday was that he wouldn't own up to the fact that he had been to this meeting. And trying to say that it was some Christian gathering. This is after he says I am the most honest person you'll ever meet. That's what he said on television a couple of weeks ago. Mr Acting Speaker, I think Mr Campbell's appearances at these sorts of gatherings are extremely ill-advised, and in my view, he would do himself a great service not attending them. But he's not the leader of the Labor Party, and Mr Speaker, for the Leader of the Opposition to come in here asking me questions about Graham Campbell as some sort of apologia for the fact that he turned up to a League of Rights meeting, I think shows where he is.
Order. The honourable member for Port Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Mr Acting Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister inform the House about the progress of reforms to Australia's labour market and the vocational training system introduced in the White Paper?
The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the White Paper, or Working Nation, was a landmark in Australian social policy. No other country has produced such a comprehensive, integrated, detailed response to the challenge of long-term unemployment. The same may be said about the challenge of training and skills, perhaps the most important challenge of the era. What we've done, Mr Acting Speaker, is to build a set out to build a vocational training system to rank with the best in the world. And I'm pleased to say that the Working Nation programs are now underway. Let me give you a couple of examples. As at the beginning of this month, 2,000 case managers are on the job, have been appointed and have taken up their positions. 65,000 people have already entered case management. That is, 65,000 unemployed people are already being case managed. In July, 16,000 clients eligible for the Job Compact were managed. In July, we also raised the subsidy rates for long-term unemployed by up to $230 for the first 13 weeks and $115 for the next 26 weeks. This is a start on the way to our aim to fund 50,000 new entry-level positions by 1995-96 and to find jobs under the Job Compact for more than 160,000 long-term unemployed people a year. And we're getting these people ready for work, matching their skills to the needs of employers. And, Mr Speaker, we've established the new Employment Services Regulatory Agency, or ESRA, which will add to the competition of the system, because ESRA's job is basically to develop a competitive market for job placement and for the Job Compact. Mr Speaker, this morning I launched NetForce, and as you know, NetForce, that's the National Employment and Training Task Force, follows on the work which was done by Lindsay Fox and Bill Kelty in establishing traineeships throughout 1992 and 93. NetForce comprises people who have experience in business, such as Mr Evans from the Metal Trades Industry Association, Mr Wright from the hotel industry, Mr Davison and others. And they all share a common ambition, I think, and that is to give confidence to young Australians and to help them enter actively into training. Now, Mr Speaker, the government is seeking to add 50,000 entry-level training places to the system, and Netforce is now going to establish training companies, that is, a company which is related to a particular industry. So we'll have a training company, for instance, in the hospitality industry, we'll have a training company in metals, we'll have a training company in engineering, we'll have a training company in various other sectors of the economy. And that will mean that employers in that sector of the economy can go to the training company which has been established by their organisation with the trade unions to take on traineeships and trainees, because it'll be a one-stop shop for the appointment of trainees in the country. And, Mr Speaker, with the training wage, this is going to simplify the appointment of trainees. And I had the chance this morning to speak to a few trainees who are now 3 or 4 months into their year of training, and they were saying how valuable the training was to them. So, Mr Acting Speaker, we'll see, by the way, with your interjection, how the Liberal Party addresses these issues on Monday, because the Leader of the Opposition said, when he was a shadow treasurer, when the white paper came out, it was a spending spree, he said. It required heroic assumptions, it was irresponsible, it would discourage investment. We'll see what they're at, well, unbelievable. Here's your press release. Here it is. The government's decision to go on a spending spree. Why would you say it's unbelievable? You've said it. Requires heroic assumptions. So irresponsible are the assumptions. Mr Speaker, well, don't try and pretend you didn't say it. Mr Acting Speaker, we'll see what the Leader of the Opposition has to say on Monday about traineeships and about the long-term unemployed and about social equity and decency in the labour market, to see that all Australians have the benefit of enjoying the recovery, and not just those who are experiencing are in jobs or taking up new jobs, but those can be trained as long-term unemployed people for a place back in the labour market.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I direct my question also to the Prime Minister. In bringing McCarthyist smears to Australia yesterday, the Prime Minister suggested that members of Parliament should not knowingly or unknowingly address an organisation known as the League of Rights. And in answer to a question I asked just a moment ago, the Prime Minister said, in relation to the member for Kalgoorlie, the Prime Minister made the point, and I quote, "He's not leader of the Labor Party." Is the Prime Minister aware that Mr Ian Taylor, the leader of the Western Australian Labor Party, issued an invitation to Australian Heritage Society members to meet him and his shadow cabinet this week? Is he aware the Society's letterhead says it was formed in 1971 and is a division of the Australian League of Rights? Will the Prime Minister now call on the Leader of the Labor Party in Western Australia to resign, or is this another case of the Prime Minister's double standards?
Order. The Prime Minister. Order.
Table the invitation from Mr Taylor.
No, this leave is not granted. The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker.
Order. The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker.
Order. The Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker. Stung, isn't he, Mr Speaker? Stung. Really stung. And let me say clearly and unambiguously, Mr Speaker. Well, do you want the answer? You want? I never called you. I never said you were an anti-Semite.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. Order. I would remind those on my left that the type of interjections collectively that are being used are not permitted and should cease. The Leader of the Opposition has asked his question. The Prime Minister will answer it. The Prime Minister.
Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition in Western Australia meets the League of Rights, he would be as foolish as the Leader of the Opposition was when he met them. Now, Mr Speaker, he would be as utterly foolish as you were when you met them. Now, Mr Speaker, this is a person who says I was always in politics. I grew up in politics. I was at my father's knee in politics. I understood politics. It was always in my blood. But at 36 years of age, he didn't know he was addressing the League of Rights. That's what he expects us. He said in Mr Oakes's column, his reporter saying, the explanation to his friends was that he was very young at the time. He was very young at the time. Just like his explanation 2 weeks ago, I had something else on my mind at the time. You know, I was emotional about the corroboree at the time. Though, as the age points out, the corroboree took place an hour after his comments. Mr Speaker, I don't say the Leader of the Opposition is an anti-Semite.
Order! Prime Minister.
I don't say he's an anti-Semite, but I do believe that he knowingly went to a meeting run by notorious anti-Semites.
To resume his seat. The Leader of the
Mr
Opposition.
Speaker,
on the point
understanding orders, there shouldn't be one rule for the Prime Minister and one for everyone else. And this question was specifically about an invitation from Mr Taylor to the League of Rights, to come to a morning meeting with the Shadow Cabinet. Now, I've asked the Prime Minister about it. A morning meeting with the Shadow Cabinet. Now, I've asked the Prime Minister, and I would have expected, Mr Acting Speaker, an answer to that question.
The Leader of the Opposition will choose the Prime Minister.
Let me give you an explicit answer to the question. Right? You want an explicit answer?
The honourable member for Ballarat.
He would be as foolish as to extend that invitation as the invitation you got to address the League of Rights, and which you attended. Now, Mr Speaker,
the honourable member for Gippsland.
The Leader of the Opposition offence was basically committed yesterday when he compounded his folly by hiding and pretending he didn't know, trying to say he attended a Christian rally, that he had no recollection of the League of Rights being there. He said he would never share a platform with the League of Rights, saying that he'd only accept an invitation by a nice and pleasant elderly couple. I mean, does he expect us to accept that pathetically childish, deceitful nonsense? Who does he think he's fooling at 36 years of age? How's the attorney? He's 32 years of age. He's the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. I mean, I wouldn't have thought, Mr Speaker, at 36 you can claim to be a child. Mr Speaker,
The honourable member for
Opposition should have came clean yesterday, said he made an error, went to the League of Rights. Instead of that, he slinked out the door of some venue yesterday, hid from the media all afternoon, and wouldn't have been brought to account at all, but for the fact he tried to stymie debate in the House, hide behind the member for O'Connor and the Leader of the National Party, and about at that stage I decided, when hearing of this, to go and say something at a doorstop. Only then did he finally come away from the pretence and admit to the fact, yes, he had been to this meeting, that it was the League of Rights, and then he attempted a public square-off. If he'd have done that earlier in the day, he would have been well and truly better off.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I move that so much of the standing and sessional orders be suspended as would prevent the Leader of the Opposition moving forthwith, that this House censure the Prime Minister. This House censure the Prime Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition has the floor.
That this House censure the Prime Minister for discrediting the high office of Prime Minister by making divisive and racist allegations for his own base political ends. Mr Speaker,
Will you take it?
Mr Speaker,
order the Leader of the House.
I second the suspension.
Well, you might like to have a chat with Ian Taylor before you make your speech to find out what your mate is up to. You and Ian are together. You're the two who go and visit Brian Burke.
Order. Is it the intention of the Leader of the House to allow this motion to go on? Right. I will now put the motion is seconded by the Leader of the National Party? No. The Leader of the... Order! The Leader of the National Party has indicated that he's seconding the motion. Is that the case?
Seconding the suspension of standing orders. I mean, I think if this guy is silly enough, to put up a proposition to suspend standing orders to discuss his peccadilloes, he should be given every chance.
The Minister will resume. All right. Order. The suspension of standing orders has been moved and seconded.
Bit of time to talk about the Labor Party in Western Australia.
Will resume his seat. We'll get these procedural
Leave that
matters
to another day.
We'll get these procedural matters out of the way. The question is that the standing orders be suspended. All those of that opinion say aye. If the contrary no, I think the ayes have it. The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Acting Speaker, I move that this House censures the Prime Minister for discrediting the high office of Prime Minister by making unfounded, divisive and racist allegations for his own base political ends. I must start off, Mr Acting Speaker, by saying it is amusing to hear that today the Prime Minister has started to shift his argument away from the argument with the ugly implication that somehow I am racist. It's only an implication, but the ugly implication to get the headlines, to saying, oh, well, it was something about the way me and my office handled the media in relation to this exercise. The Prime Minister should read the headlines today. He should have watched the television news last night. He wanted the headlines that said, for example, in the Australian, racist row, PM and Downer clash. Yes, you're right. You wanted those headlines. You want the word race struck across the Brisbane Courier Mail yesterday. That's what you're trying to incite. That's what you're trying to encourage. And you're using a different argument now because you're embarrassed about that one. But, Mr Acting Speaker, the fact is that the Prime Minister of Australia is one of the people in this country who sets the standards not just for his government, but standards for Australia. The way the Prime Minister behaves, the way he speaks, the way he looks on national television, the way he goes about his business, that affects the way we as Australians, affects the way all Australians perceive government, perceive the institution of Parliament. It affects the way as a nation we see ourselves. The behaviour of the Prime Minister, and other ministers during the course of this week began at the level of shabby and has ended up in the gutter. Earlier this week, in all good faith, the federal opposition put forward some proposals to amend the Aboriginal Land Fund, and if those amendments were supported by the government, we would be prepared to support the fund. Now that's what we said, and before the government had even seen the amendments, before you'd seen any amendments, before the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, who's walking out, who has himself been party to the shame of the Labor Party this week, before he had ever seen the amendments, the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs and the Prime Minister rejected them. We're not interested in your amendments, but we don't know what they are. That is not professional government, and that is not a way to bring Australians together in reconciliation in order to achieve a better outcome for Aboriginal people and I think a country more at home with itself. I mean, this side of the House, we represent very nearly half of Australians. Your attitude to that half of Australia is that it is illegitimate, that you don't want any part of it, that reconciliation is your side, reconciliation amongst the Labor Party factions, but forget about our side of politics and those millions of people who support us. So that was the beginning of the week. That was Monday and Tuesday's exercise. And then by Wednesday, we had the descent on Australian politics of ugly McCarthyism. Ugly McCarthyism. And can you imagine someone like Ben Chifley or John Curtin or even Gough Whitlam or Arthur Caldwell? Or should I mention his name, Bob Hawke? Remember Bob Hawke? Can you imagine those people, those heroes of the Labor Party?
The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat.
Ben Chifley would never have gone to a League of Rights meeting.
The member for Chifley will resume his seat. But the Leader of the Opposition.
But would Jack Lang have gone to a League of Rights meeting? I'll tell you in a minute about Jack Lang, this guy's hero. I'll tell you about Jack Lang because a lot of you don't know much about the history of the Labor Party. And you certainly don't know about the decency of some of the people who went before him as the leader of the Labor Party. I mean, I'm not casting aspersions on all of you because not all of you are as bad as him. And you know it, of course. Not all of you are as bad as him. But let's have a look at the way the Prime Minister tries to get the racial line up. I mean, he never comes out and says, I'm a racist, or the coalition are racist. Never anything as unsubtle as that. It's always the underlying theme. So when I made that speech in Western Australia about the Native Title Act, what was the Prime Minister's reaction to that? That I am run by the worst elements of conservatism, which he described as unrestrained bigotry. Now this was, you might say, clever politics, because he doesn't say I'm a bigot. What he does is get them to write I'm a bigot. And so on the front page of the Melbourne Age, we ended up with a headline, Downer is a bigot, says PM. That's what you wanted. Downer is a bigot, says PM, and you got it. And so that is part of the subliminal campaign to cast aspersions on everybody over here as being racist, because that is what your campaign is all about. And this, the first of the racist smears in my time as the Leader of the Opposition, which is only 3 months. Then we came to the notorious so-called League of Rights affair. Now this relates to assertions about what I did 7 years ago. 7 years ago, what was the Prime Minister doing? Do you remember what you were doing 7 years ago? Do you remember what you were doing 7 days ago? 7 years ago, this is a headline from the Sydney Morning Herald. Keating predicts lower loan rates. 7 years ago, and what happened then? They went up to 17%. Business loans went above 20%, and you created the worst recession in 60 years. So that's what he was saying 7 years ago, and what you did was put 1 million people out of work. Nice. Well, how about this? The same week, Keating move for PM denied. I just thought I'd mention it. I think you'd like to be reminded of that, wouldn't you? But the fact is that this affair over the last few days is, I think, one of the more despicable events in Australian federal political history. In many respects, this is a watershed moment in Australian political history, because we as a country have to ask ourselves, are we going to continue to tolerate the underlying, underhand racial slur from the man who is supposed to be the political leader of this country? Or is resistance going to be put up to this type of political tactic? And are all Australians eventually going to say enough is enough? Well, I tell you, they're going to say enough is enough. Yesterday in the Senate, we had Senator Bolkus. No, let's put things in better chronological order. First of all, we had somebody called David Epstein.
The Honourable Member for Leichhardt.
Now, he's not well known to members on this side of the House, but he is the man who runs the National Media Liaison Service. And he was wandering around the press gallery, shamefacedly distributing a lot of material, always designed to give the implication that I was some sort of vile, far right-wing racist. Never saying it, but always designed to give that implication. Then we had Senate question time. And in Senate question time, we had Senator Bolkus. And Senator Bolkus was talking all about using all the quotes of Eric Butler and these other characters from the League of Rights, anti-Semitic quotes that I think everyone here would be appalled with, and then associating me with those remarks. So there you are. That is part of the standard of debate used by the Labor Party. We had the effort by the minister at the table. His effort was perhaps a little more harmless, because I don't think the minister himself would ever quite sink to the standards of the Prime Minister, or in this case Senator Bolkus as well. After all, the minister at the table is a colleague of Ian Taylor's. So when it comes to guilt by association, mate, you might like to think about that. Yeah. But then we had, I must say, I must say, the most shameful event of the day, and one of the more shameful events of Australian political history. One of the ugliest moments that we've seen in Australian politics for a very long time. We had the Keating press conference, rushed out there to the press conference, and when he was asked a question, he was asked several questions, but he was asked one very specific question. He was asked whether Alexander Downer was anti-Semitic. Now, he was asked that question quite specifically. Was Alexander Downer anti-Semitic? Now, who knows? Who knows, one of your backbenchers says. Who knows? One of the women. One of the women. Who said... let's just hear who it was. Let's just hear who it was. Who knows? No, but you gave the same answer. You gave the same answer as the member for Bass, I think it was. You gave the same answer as the member for Bass. You didn't answer. You left it in the air. You wouldn't want anyone to come to the conclusion, would you, that I am not anti-Semitic? Even though we had the President of the Council of Australian Jury coming out quite clearly and saying, I am quite satisfied that as far as anti-Semitism and racism is concerned, Alexander Downer is not a racist. Now, he's the President of the Council of Australian Jury. He's somebody I know, and you are also, as it turns out, somebody who has been in this parliament with me for the last 10 or so years. And you, as a Prime Minister, know only too well I'm not anti-Semitic or racist. You know that only too well. But when that question was put to you by a journalist, you refused to answer it. That is the level of your standards. That is what a coward you are, and that is proof positive. That is, if ever you needed proof that this Prime Minister was running a subliminal campaign to have people write that I'm a racist, that is the proof we're looking for. It is the old Keating line. Smear by innuendo. Don't ever say somebody is a racist. Let others draw that conclusion. That is one of the ugliest facets of politics that I have seen. And I think the Prime Minister deserves to be very strongly censured for behaving in that way. But let me make one final point, Mr. Acting Speaker, about the Prime Minister, and that is the point on double standards. The double standards of the Prime Minister on this issue are simply incredible. Now, I've made the point in relation to Ian Taylor, the Western Australian leader of the opposition. Here it is. Ian Taylor, MLA, leader of the State Parliamentary Labor Party, invites, in nice writing, Mrs Emmy Burton and members of the Australian Heritage Society WA branch to a morning meeting with his shadow cabinet team. And it was this week. I mean, the irony of this is it was this week. 10 a.m, Monday the 29th of August 1994. In order to assist with catering for tea and coffee, please RSVP to Ian Taylor's office on 222 7233. And Kim would know the number, but Carmen wouldn't. And what is the Australian Heritage Society? Well, she turned her back, didn't she? What is the Australian Heritage Society? Well, here is its letterhead. And at the top of the letterhead, it gives the secretary and it gives the address, Midland in Western Australia. And at the bottom it says, the Australian Heritage Society was formed in 1971 and is a division of the Australian League of Rights. Now, you can make the charge. You can make the charge that I went to this meeting to talk about the Constitution and some people from the League of Rights were there and it was a front for the League of Rights. Well, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
The honourable member for Paterson.
But I can tell you, and I tell the House, I have never invited the League of Rights for morning tea. That is all of them. Invite all of them as well. I mean, really, what is the Labor Party about? I mean, where is the sincerity of the Labor Party? Now, this Mr. Taylor, he was on the radio on 6PR in Perth this morning, and he was criticising the Prime Minister, saying he shouldn't be going on in the way he does, because, of course, people out there in the community are embarrassed. They're embarrassed by the way the Prime Minister goes on. But more importantly than that, this Mr Taylor, he was saying, well, you know, members, backbenchers can go around and talk to groups like that, but as the Leader of the Opposition, I wouldn't do it. Well, isn't that strange? He is the Leader of the Opposition, and he invited them. So it'll be interesting to see what the Labor Party does about Mr Taylor. Very interesting to see. So that's one example of double standards, and I would have thought one that was just on the whole a trifle embarrassing. We had the member for Kalgoorlie and his remarks this morning, which I referred to in question time, or in my question, who are referring to the League of Rights as just an ordinary little organisation and expressing concern about the power and influence of Zionists. Now, apparently this is all right. This doesn't matter to the Prime Minister, but when somebody on our side of the House, has anything to do with any organisation of that kind in any shape or form, then it's time for the subliminal racist campaign. I have to say to you, Australians aren't impressed with those double standards. And I thought the House may be interested in the third example of double standards that I have with me. Now, it's interesting to look to see what the Prime Minister said about his great hero. His great hero in politics was Jack Lang. Remember Jack Lang? Remember Jack Lang, the man who the Prime Minister fought to get brought back into the Labor Party, campaigned to get brought back into the Labor Party? Well, Jack Lang was expelled from the Labor Party, and then years passed, and then the Prime Minister was one of those who tried to get him back into the Labor Party. This is what the Prime Minister said once of Jack Lang. Lang taught me a lot about the feeling and the spirit of the Labor Party. Jack Lang, what a hero. What a hero. And what did Jack Lang say? Well, Jack Lang could only be described as anti-Semitic. He was a man who, if you read his book, the biography of Jack Lang, he was a man who attacked Jewish migration from what was then called Palestine because he thought they were people who would dabble in black market commerce when they arrived and create Australian ghettos. So the first thing we know about the Prime Minister's hero is that he was anti-Semitic. The second thing we know about the Prime Minister's hero is that he thought the White Australia policy was a wonderful thing. And he told the House of Representatives about the White Australia policy, White Australia is the most vital plank of our national policy. Now, Mr Speaker, I make these points for a good reason. Not, of course, to suggest that the Prime Minister is anti-Semitic or the Prime Minister would like a return to the White Australia policy. Obviously, no one in this House wants that. But I make the simple point that the man he describes as his great hero in politics is a man who held those views, and it would be pretty crass to draw the conclusion from that the Prime Minister therefore was associated with someone who was anti-Semitic and who believed in white supremacy. Yet that is the sort of standard that the Prime Minister applies to public debate himself in this country. So this House should censure the Prime Minister. It should censure the Prime Minister because in the office of Prime Minister he has lowered the standards of public respectability. The Prime Minister has brought into disrepute the House of Representatives. He has brought into disrepute the institution of the Parliament. And he is a man who does not uphold the standards Australians would expect for a Prime Minister of this country. He uses any political opportunity he can, to smear his opponents, and in this particular case he has descended to the ugliest of all smears. This time the Prime Minister really has gone too far, and I think the House should understand that. I think even members on the other side, biased as they may be, even members on the other side are embarrassed by the depths to which the Prime Minister has sunk this week. Started the week on the Aboriginal Land Fund, rejecting the Coalition's amendments before he'd seen them, at best insincere, at best a man who is insincere, ended the week by sinking into the political gutter and playing around in the gutter. Suddenly he found Ian Taylor there. So not only is it embarrassing for the Prime Minister. It's worse than that. The Prime Minister has reduced the standards of public office in this country, and it's about time the House censured him and we did something about resuming better standards in Australia.
Order. Is the motion seconded?
I reserve my right.
The question is, the motion moved by the Leader of the Opposition be agreed to?
I second the motion. The Prime Minister to
Reserve
speak.
your right to
I reserve
speak.
my right to speak.
The question is the motion to be agreed to. The Prime Minister.
I move that all words after that be deleted and replaced with the following words: that this House censures the Leader of the Opposition for his deception and dishonesty in failing to tell the truth about his attendance and participation in a League of Rights meeting in Adelaide in 1987. By the way, I had that typed before lunch, just in case you'd get up to these schoolboy tactics, which I thought you would.
Order.
Now, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you why the Leader of the Opposition is up here today. Because of paragraphs like this in the newspapers.
The honourable member for Gippsland.
That says, yes, Downer did in 87 address a meeting of one of these organisations, but that isn't really the point. The point is that Downer lacks the brains, the judgment, the strength and the honesty ever to lead his party effectively, let alone the country. Now, that's why you're on your feet. That's why you're on your feet.
Order.
That's the Sydney Morning Herald, similar comments in the Age. That's why you're on your feet. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's up there.
Order.
The Leader.
Order.
That's why you're on, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's why he's on his feet today. That's what stung him. He had a chance yesterday. When this matter came out, and I'm told, Mr. Speaker,
Order. The honourable member for Ballarat.
I'm told reliably, Mr. Speaker, that the material was leaked by the Liberal Party in the first place. And when it came out, the Leader of the Opposition should have got up and said, yes, I did attend this meeting. I shouldn't have. It was a mistake. It was a foolish mistake. And I admit it, and that would have been the end of it. Instead of that, Mr. Speaker, what did he do?
Order.
Well, you've had your go. Just wait. What did he do?
Order.
He told journalists at a function he'd give them a comment afterwards, and then slunk out the back door. He then came. No, your press secretary told them. And they waited for you when you slid out the back door. And then when the Minister for Finance raised this issue in the House, you immediately...
The opposition will resume his seat. Order!
You immediately then hid behind the Leader of the National Party, then you hid behind the member for O'Connor, and you did anything but own up to the fact that you actually attended this meeting. Now, Mr. Speaker, how could you attend such a meeting and not know you had attended it? And in the event that you did, at least, Mr. Speaker, come out and say that I did attend it, it was a mistake. Everybody would have said fine. No, you wanted to gag the Finance Minister, you wanted to stop him speaking, you'd already played your little game with the journalists, and when I went out and said that which I did, and I didn't call you a racist, as you know, Mr. Speaker, then you're back in here today with this little thing. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've got all this mock indignation about McCarthyism and the rest. I didn't hear you. You didn't mind it when Senator Chapman was hopping into Graham Richardson in the Senate, did you? You didn't mind it when his family was being subject to this sort of material. When you were saying that he'd been associating with prostitutes, you didn't mind that. You flew over on a VIP aircraft with Senator Chapman on the night before he raised these matters in the Senate. You knew of it and you condoned it. Now, Mr. Speaker, you knew all about it. You're quite happy for that scam to run. You're quite happy for these unprincipled, unsubstantiated allegations to run. And now you're up crying for yourself about McCarthyist tactics and attacks on you. You attacked me for saying in Western Australia that you're pandering to unrestrained bigotry when for a few cheers you stood up and said you'd repeal the native title legislation. And that's exactly what you were doing, pandering to unrestrained bigotry. Mr Speaker, cheer chasing with the Western Australian rednecks. And now, Mr Speaker, one of the charges against me is I didn't defend you yesterday and say no, he is not a racist, this person attended this meeting not knowing, when you wouldn't defend yourself. When you wouldn't even get up and defend yourself.
Order.
Wouldn't get up and
Order.
defend
The Leader
yourself.
of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, and then he attempts to censure me. He censures me, but he's the one who attended an organisation he knew and must have known, could not but help know, was a notoriously racist and anti-Semitic organisation. Now, Mr Speaker, I do not believe that the Leader of the Opposition is an anti-Semite. I don't. But I do believe, Mr Speaker, but I do believe he is the most foolish political leader of this country since Billy McMahon. Mr Speaker, I do not believe he is an anti-Semite, but I do believe, Mr Speaker, I do not believe he's an anti-Semite, but I do believe he knowingly went to a meeting run by notorious anti-Semites. He knowingly went to a meeting run by notorious anti-Semites. Right. I do believe at a time when anti-Semites were at their most active, at a time when they were escorting David Irving around the country and giving him standing ovations for denying the Holocaust, at a time when his own colleagues were publicly denouncing the League of Rights. The very same time. I do not believe he's an anti-Semite, but I believe he lacks judgment and substance. Addressing the League of Rights in 1987 was stupid, but it was not a hanging offence. The hanging offence, Mr Speaker, was the way he behaved yesterday when he compounded his folly by hiding and pretending he did not know, pretending he was at a Christian rally. Now, Mr Speaker, in Mr Oakes' column where this first appeared, he had this to say. The truth is that Downer is not very discriminating. Well, you're going to listen. You don't go.
Order. The Leader of the Opposition. Order.
The truth is that Downer is not very discriminating. The downside of being a total political pragmatist. A related factor is his lack of a philosophical centre. If you're not sure of what you stand for, it's not easy to pick your company wisely. Downer does not know who his friends should be. Dead right. And dead right in 1987. So one day Downer Oakes then goes to talk about the debate in respect of the Tasmanian legislation. So one day he says Downer is with the godly, the next day the ungodly. Will the real Alexander Downer please stand up? No, he won't. He can't, because he doesn't have a position. Now, Mr Speaker, that's the problem. And then, of course, compounding all this, the Leader of the Opposition came in the other day with the nerve, the gall, to say of the government that it was putting at risk reconciliation with Aboriginal people in this country, when he had stood up in front of rednecks and said he'd repeal the native title legislation. Then came in disingenuously with a set of amendments which he said, unless they're agreed to, we'll oppose the bill. In other words, he had no intention of supporting the land fund legislation, none whatsoever, and it took until 3:30 the following day, that's yesterday, for the government to even see the amendments. These amendments, these important, philosophically based amendments, took 1.5 days to turn up. And what do we find in the amendments? That unless an Aboriginal person can show subjectively that they are improved in health and education and other things, then they don't get access to their land. Because, Mr Speaker, what we see by the Leader of the Opposition is simply the same mean-spirited, reactionary, right-wing policies we've always seen from them and from him, and that is basically denied Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders their land. So he comes in and says, I'm supporting the land fund, but really it's a sham to oppose it, and he was exposed in that sham. The next day he's exposed talking to a League of Rights meeting in 1987, and he's got the gall to say, if I don't defend him at a press conference, I'm to be censured. But he wouldn't defend himself. He wouldn't defend himself. Mr Speaker, he went up, he was going to make a personal explanation after question time yesterday, a personal explanation, but when he got through the question time, thought better of it. He came up to you, I'm told, and made a space for himself for a personal explanation, and then didn't give it, and then hid monkey cunning in his office until I said something at the doorstop, and then he came out belching and raging and fuming and going on. Mr Speaker, the problem with the Liberal Party is that all the moderates have been expunged from it. Fred Chaney, Peter Boehm, Chris Puplick, Ian McPhee, and the Steele Halls and the Michael Woodridges and the Chris Gallises are simply paying lip service to this hardline reactionary bunch who are going to now try and strike down the land fund, strike down the native title legislation. The Liberal Party has gone to the right, it's stayed at the right, and I can only say to the likes of Ms Gallis and Mr Woodridge, don't besmirch your political reputation dealing with them. Don't mess around with sham amendments when you know the end product is a vote against the native title legislation. Mr Speaker, after 100 days of the Leader of the Opposition yesterday, we had this press release from the Leader of the National Party. He said he set a scorching pace. A scorching pace was set, he said, by Fisher salutes Downer's first 10 weeks. A scorching pace with his professionalism and determined approach. And he said the forthcoming statement of direction will point the way in a positive but relatively low-key fashion. Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition never knows anything. He didn't know Liberal Party policy when the front benches couldn't privately sponsor staff. He didn't know Liberal Party policy on the Northern Territory Land Rights Act. He didn't know what he was doing when he signed a letter supporting the principles of the Citizens Initiated Referendum. He didn't know what he was signing at the time. He now doesn't agree with it. He didn't know when he addressed the League of Rights. Everyone else did know about the League of Rights, but he didn't. He set, Mr Speaker, a scorching pace of retreat. A scorching trace of retreat. He opposes the interests of Aboriginal Australians with the native title legislation. He opposes the land fund. He runs away from the Queen, whose place in the Constitution he champions, by saying she's quite irrelevant. Mr Speaker, the truth of the matter is about this Leader of the Opposition is he's run backwards for 100 days. He has dragged the Liberal Party back to the mad right by seeking to line up with every redneck issue. And when he's exposed talking to a League of Rights meeting, instead of coming out defending himself, he wants to hide. And if I come and say, Mr Speaker, and point out the fact that he has done so and that he should account for himself, he then goes on to seek to censure me. Well, Mr Speaker, as every other person in the Liberal Party knew at the time that the League of Rights was the organisation it was, the Leader of the Opposition should be ashamed of himself that he appeared before them. He still hasn't told us why he appeared before this notoriously racist anti-Semitic organisation, yet he goes and moves this sham amendment. Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is in trouble politically. He's in trouble politically. And as a consequence, he relies upon an invitation from the Western Australian Leader of the Opposition, which I'm now given a note to say was one of 980 pro forma invitations to community groups in the state electorate of Elena. Mr Speaker, and the list of groups came from the State Library of Western Australia and their InfoLink database. Mr Speaker, one thing the Leader of the Opposition in Western Australia has not done, and that is accept an invitation from a notorious racist and anti-Semitic body, as did the Leader of the Opposition.
Order.
He should own up for his foolishness, but in owning up to it, again demonstrate the fact that he's frankly too stupid to lead a major political party, that he's taken the Liberal Party backwards in a reactionary fashion, and the longer he's possessed, like I said the other day, you can't afford a leadership battle, but you can't afford to keep him. That's your dilemma, and I'm afraid for you, you're stuck with it. I commend the amendment to the House.
Order. Order. The members of the National Party holding up signs will not do that. Order. Order. The honourable member for Parkes. Order. Order. Before calling the Leader of the National Party, order. The original question was that the motion of censure moved by the Leader of the Opposition be agreed to. To this motion, the Honourable the Prime Minister has moved that his amendment that all words